great to have you with us here on Leading Edge once again. I'm your host, Jeff Smith. In just a few minutes, we're going to bring in WTOL 11 Chief Meteorologist Chris Vickers to talk about the wild weather swings and what we can make of this winter season or lack thereof. But first, Otsego Schools, Otsego Local Schools has fallen on some tough financial times. In a letter to parents and others connected to the district this week, Superintendent Kevin O'Shea laid out some pretty hard facts. The school district, he says, is going to have to either increase revenue to balance the budget or make a lot of cuts. And we want to get right to our first guest, Otsego, the aforementioned Otsego Superintendent Kevin O'Shea joining us. Kevin, good to have you here. I know these are tough conversations to have. You guys have an income levy vote coming up on March 19th, but I wanted to kind of go back to the letter and what you laid out. And as I was reading through this, I mean, you kind of cut straight to the punch with a lot of the, I guess, the major stakeholders as far as the district is concerned and say, this is where we are. My question to you is, how did we get here?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. Yeah, none of these conversations are fun. The reality is, and what we've been communicating now for quite a while is our 5-year financial forecast, we are deficit spending every year for the next 5 years. And by the end of the 5th year of that forecast, that deficit spend gets up to about $1.3 million. So at last month's
board, it's like having a credit card that you just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing.
Sure.
Right?
So we do have reserves right now. We have a little over close to $4 million, left over or just sitting there that we are going to tap into that now, right? We're depleting that. And you can only do that for so long, right? So the board took action to put a levy on the ballot in the fall. That levy did fail. It was a close election. Received some feedback from voters.
What did you hear?
So for the most part,
and just remind people what you're seeking.
Yeah, so we're seeking 0.5% income tax, right? So 0.5% income tax, and if passed, that will generate $1.9 million a year for our schools, and will balance our budget, right? So when we got the feedback from voters, they were pretty clear. Number one, they didn't know enough about it. That communication was poor. That was a big one. The second thing that was pretty obvious in their communication was they didn't care for it being a continuing tax. So the board hearing that feedback, this spring we're up in the March ballot. It's still 0.5% income tax, but it is a 5-year only. It's no longer a continuing ask. So after 5 years, it'll either expire or we can put it up for a vote to either be renewed or reduced or whatever we look like at that time, right? And we've really hit the ground running hard, just communicating the facts of this, trying to explain exactly what's in our forecast.
You said you need, in the letter, you said you need to raise revenue or reduce expenditures by approximately $353,000 and change in fiscal year 25, $341,000 in fiscal year 26. You laid out a list of cuts that need to happen. I want to show people at home what we're talking about here. You break all these down, and Kevin, as you look at this list, now these are cuts that you're proposing. These can still be talked about. These are just possibilities, correct?
Yes. So everything that we discussed at the board meeting was in a goal to try to figure out how we could balance the budget by the end of the 5-year forecast, right? We were very specific, though, that if this were not to pass in March, we know that we need to balance for next year, and we're projected to deficit spend by about $350,000, and we laid out very specific things that could help us balance our budget next year.
So the proposed cuts, and then, as you said, if the levy were to fail, these are things, we're going to show another list here for our viewers at home. This is what has to go, yes, if things don't go well on March 19th.
Correct, yes. We looked at all the stipends that we provide for coaches and things like that. Now, those are assistant coach stipends. We have esports. We have all sorts of clubs and organizations like that. We talked about eliminating those stipends. We would reduce our kindergarten classes by 1. We actually don't have to cut to do that. We have a retirement in first grade this year that was announced, so we would just not fill that retirement and move a kindergarten teacher to that position. Now that will reduce the number of kindergarten classes we have, and of course increase then class size in the kindergarten classes. So we looked at that. We also have in the high school, we have credit recovery and offer OVLA, like online courses for students who need that or have requested that. We use that for credit recovery. We use it to provide extra electives that we otherwise can't offer in the class. And we looked at cutting that position as well at the high school.
We got about a minute in this segment. I asked you once again, I said, how did you get to this point? Is it the economy? Is it just a whole bunch of things wrapped up into one?
Yeah, it's a mixture of things. I mean, number one, it's been over 20 years since we've had to ask for operating money in our district. And over those 20 years, we see the same things everyone's seeing out there. Inflation, the rising prices of pretty much everything, all the repairs we make, the services.
But you said you also spend fewer dollars per student than a lot of other districts your size, right?
Lowest cost per pupil in all of Wood County. We have less administrators per student than anyone in Wood County. We actually have more students per teacher in a classroom than anyone in Wood County. So we operate with less teachers, less administrators, and we spend less money than most districts. But over time, we've gotten to a position where the revenue coming in has just not met with the expenditures going out.
We're going to continue our conversation. Stay right there. We'll be back with more of Leading Edge right after this. Welcome back here on Leading Edge. Otsego Local School Superintendent Kevin O'Shea talking about some of the financial straits with the district. And it's just, we were talking before we came on today. I said, you've got a lot of students per teacher. I wanted to know about attrition and trying to keep, or retention as far as those teachers are concerned. Do you find that as a struggle as well right now?
Yeah, I think across the board in education, we're seeing this as a major issue. We are seeing students that are coming in less prepared, right? We're seeing behaviors, we're seeing things that we haven't seen ever really, and it's becoming a strain in the classroom, right? And it's requiring resources to be purchased and all sorts of different things to be able to teach and meet the expectations of the state, right, in the classroom, right? And we're seeing teachers get burnt out. We're seeing teachers for the first time, they get done with their first year and they're like, yeah, I don't ever want to do this again.
You're not saying that hypothetically. You've had situations like that.
Multiple, yes. Yeah. So we see that quite often.
And I think this conversation came up because we were talking about the cutting of aides, which has, you have found, especially in your school district, that it's almost necessary to have that second set of hands there in the classroom.
Yeah, they're critical. In fact, many of them are written into kids' plans, so they're required, right? So when you have a teacher who's in a third or fourth grade classroom and they have 23 or 24 kids in that class, and it only takes 1, 2, 3 of them that are that really need serious attention, right? And that's what we're there to provide. We want to do that. But when that teacher has to take that attention away from the rest of their class because that student or those students occupy so much of their time, that's incredibly stressful, right? That's not an easy thing to do. Those aides are critical, right? I mean, they are in those classrooms helping. You look at behavior specialists, you look at all these positions that are in education, those are pivotal things. I laugh. You also see a lot of dogs being brought into school, therapy dogs, facility dogs, things like that. Mm-hmm. Those dogs make an impact, I mean, they are there, they can pull a kid's attention, get a kid calmed down, and get them back in the classroom learning. These are things that are kind of new and they're all of a sudden happening, and they're causing a serious strain on especially young teachers that
Otsego has how many students?
About 1,700 in the district.
And are split among how many different schools?
3 schools.
Okay, 3 total school
buildings. 2 buildings, 3 schools.
I wanted to ask you specifically about the size of the school, where it is located, and when you find small districts like this in such a situation you're in. I also, before I forget, you wanted to point out there is some misinformation as far as the actual levy and what the amount is, right? As far as what it's going to cost a homeowner.
Yeah, so I mean, it is a half of 1%. We are still getting
an income tax levy.
Yes, income tax levy, and it is a half of 1%. And we still have a lot of people who think it's a 50% tax, but it's, again, 1% of $10 is $1, and a half of that percent is 50 cents, right? So it is not $5. A 50% tax, right, is a half of 1%.
I just wanted to clear that up real quick. My question I was going to ask you, Kevin, once again, Kevin O'Shea, Superintendent of Otsego Local Schools. Where you guys are situated there in Wood County, you've got Perrysburg near you, you've got Bowling Green near you, you've got Anthony Wayne near you. Is there ever a reality where one of those school districts absorbs Otsego to make it work, or has to?
I mean, our student population is probably too high for anything like that.
I know it is for Perrysburg, knowing what they've been going through.
Dear Tom, but yeah, I mean, we're a large enough school district to be, and we've already done this consolidation. Many years ago, it was before my time. When Grand Rapids was pulled into what was Washington Township and all the moves that happened. And we're made up of Weston, Tontogany, Haskins, and Grand Rapids.
Right.
So we've taken 4 communities and turned it into one. And we're a strong, vibrant school district. And again, over 20 years since we've had to do this, the consolidation of our campus really helped. That was a painful time in our community's history, but we've really come out of that strong. We always say around campus, one heartbeat, go Knights. I mean, we are 4 communities, we make one school, but we are one, right? And it's just, we're at that time where we're asking, and again, when I'm talking to you, I'm not here to tell people to vote yes or no. That's really not even something I'm allowed to do. I'm just here to be able to provide information, shed light on things that are going on inside our schools, encourage people to come to board meetings. This is an important process anyway, and that's what we want people to do.
Right.
So it's just really important that people engage and they know the facts. They have factual information so they can be informed when they go out to vote.
45 seconds left. Sitting in your seat last week was Representative Elgin Rogers, who is a co-sponsor on a bill to pay teachers more, increase that base salary from $35,000 to $50,000. We've only got a few seconds left, but is that even doable for a district like yours?
Yeah, I don't see how that's feasible. Do I think teachers deserve it, and would that be wonderful? Yes, but that certainly I don't think local taxpayers are going to want that burden. And so that's where I don't know where that comes from or where that money comes from. We certainly, obviously, in our situation, could not afford to raise the wages like that. But yeah, that would be a very difficult thing for us to do.
Understand. Kevin, thank you so much. Keep us posted. We will stay in tune.
It's great seeing you, Jeff.
Good to see you as well. Stay right there. We've got more to come. Chief Meteorologist Chris Vickers joining us talking about this winter that wasn't. We'll be right back. Welcome back once again here on Leading Edge. Record highs in February. He said highs. A winter that's been, well, not very wintry, a little bit of cold, virtually no snow. Remember saying in the fall, man, we are due for a bad one this year. It just hasn't been the case. So I wanted to bring in Chief Meteorologist Chris Vickers joining us. So Chris, my goodness, I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to kind of dive into what we've been experiencing, what we've been seeing, and why.
Yeah, can it really end winter if it feels like it never really began in the first place? Jeff, a lot of this going into this, and we go back to where it really started in the month of December. Look at this. Can you believe it? Remember that it was 9 degrees above average compared to normal. It was the warmest all-time ever on record.
And it's not just this week that we're dealing with, obviously this past week and what it was. This started much before that.
It really did, and it was the evolution of that El Nino weather pattern, so it continued straight through the winter season. We saw that into January, still a little bit above average, and now that we've just topped off the month of February, it was quite a bit above average. Another month about 9 degrees above average.
So talk to us a little bit about, everybody talks about snowfall, right? We haven't had kids get a lot of snow days this year, Chris.
It's the measuring stick, right, when it comes to winter, so to speak, and we're in the driver's seat right now for the least snowiest winter season on record. Now, we still have some time to go here in March, but the weather pattern not going to be favorable for widespread snowfall. And ironically enough, Jeff, if you look at the list right here, the top 5, it is now back-to-back years that have been in the top 5 least snowiest winters on record. We typically average about 37 inches of snow per year.
And we've talked about this time and time again. We understood that we were going into this certain weather pattern. So talk a little bit about El Nino, what we thought going into it, what we've actually realized.
We were more confident than ever that this was going to be a strong El Nino this year. That is the warmer than average equatorial Pacific waters. Bottom line with this, Jeff, it changes the jet stream, and it does so in a pretty dynamic way, more active southern tier of the jet stream. But for us, more importantly, it generally signals dry and warm weather, and that's exactly what we saw through the course of the winter season. Both those, for the most part, came together in our area.
And we talked about snowfall and what that typically does, and you see the pattern here. Where do we fall as far as the normal, the strong, the very strong?
Right. We're well over here, well below normal. We're going to be well below 50% of our average snowfall for the year, and those correlations remain strong in an El Nino year. In history, every year we've seen an El Nino similar to this, our winters, they were well above average.
So we see the temperatures, and everybody's been talking about it, but there's some real facts in the data.
Right. There's some real facts in the data. We're going to end this winter season now that we're into March here, 6.5 degrees above average, an incredibly warm winter season, likely to be the third warmest ever on record, and our snowfall deficit, that does continue to grow.
I want to dive into this just a little bit because obviously we just went through this week. And listen, I've lived around here all my life. I know there are blips. There are times when the weather does wacky things. We set a record this week for the highest recorded temperature ever
In a winter month.
In a winter month.
December, January, and February, and you know you felt it, 73 degrees. We've never reached that threshold in what we consider a winter month, and it really just flew past any of the record highs. And Jeff, this is really becoming a little bit alarming as well with how this winter season is played out, not only with the warmth, but also, this got your attention this week as well.
There was instability, I think is the word that I've heard John and Chris use.
Scientifically speaking, that's correct.
I've heard you guys use a lot, but honestly, it was a very serious scenario that kind of played out earlier this week with severe weather in the month of February.
In the month of February, about a dozen tornadoes were reported in northern Illinois. Now, fortunately, no major injuries. There was 2 tornadoes that were confirmed then. Outside of that, up into Michigan, that fairly strong EF2 just south of Flint.
Grand Blanc, I think, is where that hit. Yeah.
And significant damage to some areas up there. And then this got your attention as well toward the I-70 corridor from Dayton to Columbus. About 6 tornadoes that were reported in this area, all EF1 and EF2 tornadoes.
A lot of them, you know, it was funny. I told this story to a lot of people here at work. I said, my daughter at Ohio State, she had to actually go in the basement between 3 and 5 a.m. The timing of those as well, that's weird, right?
Very unusual, and that is really a signal toward an unusual weather pattern that we identified a few days in advance. And to get this amount of tornadoes, about 6 or 7 that ended up being reported in Ohio in February, and have them occur overnight, something that really hasn't happened in recorded history.
I want people to understand, kind of before we get to the damage that we saw, and we do have some video we can show you out of Central Ohio, but one of the things we had talked about going into this week, Chris, was just the fact that it was a possibility we could see some severe weather, but we saw it kind of, there was a little bit of a wedge in between where the severe weather was.
We were fortunate with that. Most of that instability down south stayed down south, and the better wind shear that caused some of the tornadoes was back towards Chicago. So we sort of split the threat on that. But certainly something that we're going to keep a close eye on is we've seen an expansion, so to speak, Jeff, of the severe weather season. Now to be alert and to be on guard. Here in the month of February, March, April, really any time of the year we stress that severe weather can and does occur.
Let's talk a little bit more. You were able to pinpoint exactly where this hit, specifically the one that was in the Dayton area, not too far from Kettering, where yours truly was born.
How about that?
Just wanted to point that out.
This is the EF1 tornado that did damage to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This was just after 4:30 in the morning. The signature showing up on radar just east of I-70. That is an indication of the tornado that was briefly on the ground over toward Dayton.
And that has become a hotbed for tornadic activity. Vandalia, Dayton, that area was the one that got hit just a few years ago.
It really has, which is why we stress being alert. So what are we seeing from a climate perspective when it comes to these types of tornadoes and unusual February events? When we're talking tornadoes, we have an increase in the length of severe weather season. Now, based on the data, Jeff, this is happening over a longer time, February into March, and even going into November and December. Really, our length of our severe weather season is increasing. Also, the frequency is increasing. So these events, they are becoming a little bit more common, a little bit more frequent. We see more storm energy associated with some of these events. Now, what we can also say about this from a climate perspective, there's really still no clear link between tornadoes and climate change. It is still not fully understood. We know the season's getting longer, and we know it's becoming more frequent, but how it actually plays into how tornadoes develop is still a bit uncertain.
Chris, we got about 3 minutes left. I wanted to talk a little bit about what our new normal is. Is there a new normal?
There is a new normal, and the data and the statistics really says this, and it says it in stark contrast. So every 10 years, so to speak, like taking a census, we actually update what is our normal averages and normal records. So here's what we have, and here's the data, and I've put all 12 months out here, and compared to what, Jeff, you might have thought maybe growing up, what was normal back then.
Yeah.
Every single
cold and
month.
snowy. That's what it was.
Cold and snowy is what you remember,
yeah.
right? Every single month now averages significantly warmer, 2 to 3 degrees warmer in most cases. So these are our new normals. Pick a month here, Jeff. Across the board, our new normal is warmer than average temperatures.
And behind you, December really stands out.
December stands out. That is one that has really trended warmer the quickest. That is about 3 degrees warmer than average. That played out again this year. Yeah. Remember, we had the warmest December on record, a trace of snow. There was no measurable snowfall. So some truly eye-opening data when it comes to the new climate normal. Yes, we could say scientifically we are experiencing warmer temperatures as the decades go on.
And Chris, you've got a list of the impact, right?
The impacts. I think you've probably seen or felt most of these. So we have heavy agriculture in this area. A lot of us rely on farming and producing and allowing the land to produce for our livelihood and our income. Longer growing seasons is what we are noticing. Now, in some respects, Jeff, the growing season here is increased by anywhere from about 21 to 35 days. That is an astronomical change from the 70s and 80s to now our longer growing season.
We got about 2 minutes left. Let's go ahead and go through these. We talked about ice coverage and the fact we had lake effect snow in February because the lakes weren't frozen over.
They weren't frozen over, and that's becoming more common and more frequent. So less ice cover can lead to coastal erosion, more evaporation from the lakes, but also recreation. We rely on this area to see ice fishing. It's just not something that's becoming more common. In fact, less frequent with what we're going to be experiencing with recreation. An increase in invasive species, algal blooms, could also be something that we see going forward, and an increase in, unfortunately, the pests, the mosquitoes, the bugs, and such like that.
And our last two up here, decrease in days of measurable snow. We've seen that in our number one, impacts to energy demands, consumption. 30 seconds left. Let's go to our last slide and just show what we're thinking about El Nino.
So El Nino is going to be fading away. What really dominated this winter season, eventually by the time we get to this summer, it will go toward a neutral phase. And it early heads up to this. By the time we head into next fall and perhaps next winter, we could flip this winter pattern, and a La Nina may be likely by summer, fall, and into next winter.
And maybe even in this fall, Chris, we might be saying once again, boy, we're due for a bad one this year.
We'll see. We're going to get another one. Remember 2013, 2014, bad winters can and do happen, but the new normal may be warmer than average conditions.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. If you missed any part of our interviews, check out the WTOL 11 YouTube page and also check out the Leading Edge podcast. We'll see you next time.